think General Motors better move on.
Move on because the cars aren't moving out. GM dealers are standing around looking for customers.
Next week, 39,000 auto workers across the country will be laid off as the big three automakers close plants due to slow sales.
The current state of the U.S. auto industry is abysmal.
It's not inconceivable that the American industry could cease to produce cars in this country. In other words, if the cars aren't profitable, if we can't make a profit out of the car, then we're going to go out of business.
Ford and General Motors both reported staggering first quarter losses.
When the automobile industry catches a cold, Detroit catches pneumonia. We're pretty damn sick right now. But for that matter, so is the country.
This was a very difficult period for the auto industry and for auto workers. And we had lost a lot of market share. We're continuing downhill. And obviously our concern was how do we stop this downhill slide and reverse it. And so it was merely exploring options and what could we do.
We started what was called an S-car project. And by the time that came through the works up to the engineering policy committee, it didn't take long to look and see. It had a great big red number at the bottom of the line. So we said, hey, this isn't going to fly. So we did a lot of hemming and hawing, a lot of head scratching, and we decided, hey, we got to do something like this. If we can't anchor the bottom of that line, we're going to be in trouble.
And it was a rather alarming situation for, I think, everybody, the corporation and the union, that it appeared that we were giving up on the fact that we couldn't compete competitively in a small market. And as I remember, it was the corporation, I think it was Al Warren, who had approached Don Eflin a couple of times asking him to consider some type of study, because the concern was if today we can't compete in a small market, well, what says tomorrow we're going to be able to compete in the mid-size market and on up.
The handwriting was on the wall for those that knew what was going on in the auto industry. GM was making money only because of its size. GM was not making money on North American operation and hadn't for a long time. It's just that by using good accounting practices, you can move money around.
And we said, let's figure out how do we do this. We can't say to ourselves, we don't know how to make a car. But the answer came back, well, we ain't gonna make it the way we're making it now, that's for sure.
There was a small group of people that were working on this project in the Troy operations. And both Don Evelyn and Al Warren said, you do not have enough people to make this happen. You need more help. And so they come up with this idea of, let's get people that build cars every day for a living, and let's get them involved with this project, and let's ask them what it's going to take to competitively build a small car in the United States.
And I got a call from my shop chairman asking me to be a part of a project that General Motors was implementing. At first I told him no. He explained it was going to be a lot of traveling and etc. And I told him, I said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm kind of homebody. So he told me to think about it. He says, you would be really good for this project. So he said, I'll call you back at 4 o'clock and with your decision.
I don't think there was anything magic about the number. They actually said, well, let's get 100 people.
And I thought about it. I said, I'll do it.
None of us really knew what this gathering was all about, but we could feel something in the air.
And there was actually one person that stood up after the charge was laid out, or what we were there for, and that person said, this is a bunch of BS, I don't believe in it, and that person went back to work in the plant. And thereby we were left with 99 people, and that's how the group became known as the Group of 99.
We were really basically given a process that this is how you're going to work together in these teams, and here's the structure. And oh, by the way, what you come up with is up to you.
It took a while to understand that we were not to be focusing on technical side of the car. There were already engineers who were working very hard on that. As time went on, we started to understand that our real mission was to focus on the people side that had to do with motivation and attitude and commitment and ownership and accountability and a lot of those things that money can't buy, but you have to earn and you feel inside if they're there or not.
I think that the systemic approach of what we did really took Al Warren and Don Eflin off guard. I don't think they really expected what they got. And what they got was two very adversarial groups saying, we could work together like this.
I'm a union guy. Been building cars for 12 years. That's me, the good-looking one. That's Ted. He's management. Obvious, huh? We were both part of this group. We were helping to start a brand new company in an industry that was already pretty competitive. We had a name, Saturn, but if it was going to be a name people remembered, we knew we had to do our homework. So we did. We talked to companies all over the world. We didn't care what they made or where. The point was they were doing things right. They hired good people and listened to them. If this is what worked, and it obviously did, then that's what we'd do at Saturn. You know, Ted's a strange guy. Puts ketchup on his French toast. But other than that, he's easy to travel with. Imagine, labor in bed with management. We laughed then, but it was all worth it. At Saturn, we're already starting to get some visitors of our own.
I remember when we were out at Saturn, we were talking to this woman, and the first time I heard the phrase, the old world, I said, what does that mean? She said, well, what that means is this. She said, I figured out at GM how to do my job in half the time that the engineers told me it would take. She said, I just figured it out on my own. You know, day in and day out, you're doing something, you realize, God, there's got to be some way to do this better. And I think people are ingenious like that. And she said, and I felt ingenious like that. And she said, so I figured it out. And then they told me, you do it the way you're told to do it. And so she said, I would do it that way while they were there. And then when they would leave, I'd do it my way, and I'd get my job done in half the time, and then I'd read till they came around. And then I'd go back to doing it the way they told me to do it. And she said, that was the old world. That was the old world.
I think that to understand that point of view, we need to grasp that a general idea was that all workers wanted was pay and benefits. That if we take care of our workers and we give them money and we give them benefits, they're going to be happy. They're happy, they'll do good work, they'll do quality work. Well, the problem with that point of view is that it's wrong.
Most people in Detroit think a car is seat bags and headroom, and it's got to be more than that, and it is at Saturn.
You simply can't do it with equipment or robots or programs or systems. You've got to have a people organization. And in fact, if you have to have a people organization, then you got to start with philosophy and values that wrap its arms around the folks. Because if you don't do that, you can't have a non-traditional organization. And I think, by the way, while we're doing all this, we can build a good car and make money doing it.
And the team came back and said, hey, as long as we're doing this, let's go really big time. I said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, let's get new dealers. Let's find a new way to deal with customers. Find out how customers want to be treated. Find out how dealers want to handle this thing. Find out how the market wants to be understood and moved.
I never forget, Lori Danko called me. I was back in my old plant in Mansfield, Ohio, and she called me. She said, Dora, guess what? They bought into everything we did. I said, everything? Lori? She said, yes. Saturn's going to be a brand new nameplate.
I was actually the reporter who broke the story that Saturn was going to go corporate. I had some good friends inside GM who had called me up one day to say, you won't believe what GM is doing. And frankly, I was quite surprised by what I had heard. The idea of stepping outside of what was then an extremely hidebound organization to find a unique way to do something that was truly unique in terms of product, in terms of manufacturing, and as I came more and more to understand, in terms of the way that the car was distributed, serviced, and so on. It was pretty striking.
It was always unclear how much was PR and how much was not, and how much was even controlled by public relations. Shortly after that announcement, for example, Saturn had said, we are going to build a new greenfield plant, we haven't selected a location, and that kicked off the parade of governors that marched into General Motors and said, we've got a great deal for you in our state. I don't know how much General Motors expected of that to happen or not. I think even Phil Donahue did a program on it.
Do present GM dealers get first dibbies on this?
Absolutely, and it's the ones that have the best customer service.
Well, then it's not a separate dealer network.
But they'll have to apply and make separate facilities. It will be a separate dealer network. They won't do it in their old facility. They have to build a new facility.
Oh, you have to have a separate storefront for the Saturn, is that so?
Absolutely.
Can you put a Toyota, or can you put a, no other car in the showroom?
No.
We don't get a smorgasbord type of franchise then?
That's right.
So the dealer's rolling the dice on one product here.
Boy, I'd love to roll my dice on that one, wouldn't you?
All right.
I don't know how much of that was planned and not. My suspicion is that the momentum got rolling more than even General Motors expected.
General Motors today announced that it will form a new passenger car division to be called the Saturn. It will develop and market new subcompact cars. State and local officials have been desperately seeking Saturn because GM predicts it will be hiring 6,000 workers and creating 14,000 other supplier jobs.
In a war between the states, governors are racing to Detroit, to General Motors' doorstep, to win what may be the economic prize of the decade.
I'll take it.
Well, I think what happened is that Saturn kicked off with a lot of hoopla. You know, Roger announced it was the coming of the 21st century, it's the way we're going to do business, and so, my God, everybody and his brother jumped all over it and just exploded. And I think the governors coming to town to want it in my state was not expected, and I think this thing just got bigger and bigger, and hoopla took over, and one of my first reactions was, we got to get this back to reality.
We were told point blank, and this is a personal discussion I had with someone from the International Union, who told me that you couldn't take UAW folks and put them in that environment because they didn't want to make those kinds of decisions. They didn't want that much responsibility, and I just looked at them and I said, I'm going to prove you wrong.
You put a lot of yourself into something like this, a lot of, you can really get emotionally involved with a project like this. It all started with the challenge for the old values. Maintain the old values. Yeah, so we jumped all over that. You couldn't have taken over an old plant and done that. You had to come someplace where it's, where you can start over in effect. So then we started looking for a place you could move people to that had a good quality of living, and we stumbled on Spring Hill. When you fill a place up with high technology, then you have to train the people that can take care of it. You can't build cars without people. So if you could take all that enthusiasm and translate that into the car, it's a real marriage. But if you never forget the people part of it, then you're going to be all right. That's how we got Spring Hill.
Bob Boroff and I spent a tremendous amount of time on the floor with the teams, trying to get them to make sure they understood the importance of a successful rollout. And as you well know, we delayed shipping cars for a long time, primarily because Bob and I wouldn't ship them. We wouldn't ship them because they weren't ready. And a lot of credibility was gained by us not shipping those cars, because the team members almost challenged us by seeing if we would ship them. And when they finally realized that Bob and I stood for quality, not quantity, we made some real quantum leaps in credibility with the whole Saturn vision.
We were really going to try to get good at what made sense to us intellectually and what felt right to us in our hearts. And so that was a very exciting time.
we watched and we waited. And we watched and waited for an awful long time, because if you remember, after the initial flurry of attention, all the news releases, all the site selection committee meetings, and all the meetings with the various governors who traipsed to Detroit, they suddenly did a blackout, and there was almost nothing to be said for 2 years, 3 years. Trying to get any details out of that company was impossible.
And everybody was skeptical. The press was extremely skeptical. The press killed Saturn many, many times. I look back at my own stories that I wrote, and right up until that car went on sale, we were writing stories that it would not happen.
Saturn car will be rolling off the line.
It used to be I sold the product that I was making, but that was just one part of 1,000 parts that went into the makeup of a car. Gonna be someday, I guess. There was no way I would ever see the cars that it went into. The way things were done, I wasn't involved. No one would ever ask me what I thought. Then I heard about Saturn building a whole new car plant to build a new car. And they had figured out a new way of running things too. And no one else in the world had done all this, not that I know of. Not since the Model T anyway. Raw material comes in the back door and a car comes out at the other end. It seems to me that when you see where your part fits into the big picture, it means a lot more. It's my perception anyway. Now we got people watching us. Some for us, some against. But I'll tell you, when I go to the end of this building and I see that car sitting there, I'm gonna feel all right. It's gonna be a great feeling to know that I was a small part of history.
Is there anybody here that's proud of their accomplishments since they've been with Saturn, huh?
It's a challenge to get out there and work as a team and make sure things go right. That pulls people together faster than anything else. And I think that's what Saturn had going for it. I think it's a big factor in the Saturn success that it was one big challenge.
Our philosophy was that if the customer has a problem with the car, we are going to step up and address it. That means having a recall, we'll have a recall. We'll probably have a recall in situations where other car manufacturers would never have. But we knew we were going to have that. What shocked me the most is it happened so quick.
A setback for General Motors' hottest-selling car, Saturn. Virtually every Saturn car ever built by General Motors is being recalled to repair an engine problem.
Simply replace